So there's an arc to happiness. Basically from kind of 0 to 25, it's the stuff of Star Wars, discovery, spilling into adulthood, football games, magic. Then shit gets real from kind of 25 to 45. Work is hard, economic stress. You realize you're not going to be senator or have a fragrance named after you. And most devastating, someone you love gets sick and dies. However, a wonderful thing happens in your 40s and 50s, earlier if you're soulful, is you begin to take stock of your blessings, realize that life is finite, and start finding appreciation in relationships, in nature, in your achievements, and you get happier. The lesson here is keep on keeping on. Happiness waits for you.
Does money make us happier?
So there is a correlation between money and happiness. Middle-income households are generally happier than lower-income households, and the affluent are generally happier than middle-income. That's the bad news. The good news is that it tops out, and that is once you can afford basic health care, take nice vacations, absorb an economic shock, have some of the material trappings of a capitalist society, that there is no correlation beyond that point and happiness. So billionaires are no happier than the affluent. Now, they're not any less happy either. That's a bit of a myth that all billionaires are unhappy. So the lesson here is bust a move to some semblance of economic security, but then realize that money is just the ink in your pen. It can write different chapters, it can make certain chapters burn brighter, but it's not your story.
When did you decide to study the algebra of happiness?
So this is a function of two things. One, my class, I've taught 4,500 students, and they think they're at business school, at least initially, to develop the skills to develop greater economic security for them and their families. But what they're really there is to figure out a way such that they can develop a more satisfying narrative or develop happiness around them and their families for the rest of their lives. And my last class is called The Algebra of Happiness, and it's also a journey of personal discovery, and that is my blessings are this, and my mood is this, and I wanted to bring the two in line with each other. I struggle with mild depression that I think is fueled by anger, and I recognized that I needed to take more seriously the best practices around being happy, just for my own satisfaction.
I've heard you talk about this before, but you've had billionaires come in and say, follow your dreams.
Yeah.
Why is that bad advice?
So we have two types of speakers at NYU, either people who are incredibly interesting and inspiring or billionaires. We've decided at business school that if you're a billionaire, that means you know a lot about life. And they typically end their talks with one statement, and that is follow your passion. And I've found that the majority of people who tell you to follow your passion are already rich. And that is there'll be very well publicized stories about Jay-Z and Tom Brady and Beyonce pursuing their passions and becoming billionaires. You should assume you nor your kids are Jay-Z. And what I found is that if you pursue something you're good at, becoming great at it makes you passionate about whatever it is. The accoutrements of being great at something, relevance, success, pride, these things, the respect of your colleagues, the opportunity to build great things will make you passionate about whatever it is. Very few kids dream of being tax accountants, but the best tax accountants in the world are wealthy, secure, have a greater selection of mates, and have a lot of personal pride and feel relevance. And this makes them passionate about being tax accountants. So what's the key learning here? Not to follow your passion, but your job, especially as a young person, is to find something you're good at and then invest the requisite 1,000 hours, grit, perseverance to become great at it. The problem with thinking you're supposed to pursue your passion is that when work gets hard, and it always does, you might fall into the trap of thinking, well, this is hard, which means it must not be my passion and I should find something else. Work is hard. Being great at anything is very difficult.
I've heard you talk about this. You talk about this in your book. Your sister asked, why are you so pissed off all the time? What is your relationship with depression, with happiness now as you kind of look back at your life?
So I think one of the remedies, if you will, or one of the things that's helped me in my struggles with anger and depression is to have some perspective and to take stock of your blessings on a regular basis. And for a lot of us, the reality is our blessings are here. To be born in America, if you're healthy, if you have people in your life that love you and also know that they're loved by you, then you are blessed. And the willingness and the ability to learn mechanisms such that your mood foots to your blessings is a core competence and an attribute, and it's something that's important for all of us and myself to pursue. This is a wonderful journey and something we should all spend more time trying to figure out.
When did you realize currency to use is admiration.
So, especially among men, we see that admiration or affection isn't a currency, that if we compliment someone else, for some reason we're giving up some sense of self or worth ourselves. It's as if we're giving something away. But to express admiration for people is to reflect confidence. It's been scientifically proven to make you happier. And also, one of the biggest mistakes we make that gets in the way of our happiness is we assume that if we admire other people or we love them, that's enough. You have to express your admiration. You have to express your love. People are not telepathic. So being a loving person doesn't mean thinking loving thoughts. It means expressing your admiration, your respect, and your affection for other people. The happiest people are not only the ones who feel most loved, but know there are other people in their lives that know that they are loved by you.
You said that there's a study that shows that alcohol is tied most closely to unhappiness, right?
So the largest study of its kind, the Grant study on longitudinal happiness, found that the factor most common in the cohort that was least happy over the course of their lifetime was alcohol. And I think every young person needs to take stock of their relationship with substances and not only use as a litmus test whether you're living under a bridge or can't make money. There are a lot of functioning alcoholics out there, but are substances getting in the way of your relationships or your career advancement? And if they are, address it early and address it very aggressively. The same study shows that on the whole, the one best practice across happiness is the depth and meaning of your relationships. At work, do you feel respected and admired, and do you admire and respect other people? Amongst your friends, do you get a sense of camaraderie and joy? And do you know they feel camaraderie and joy from you? And most importantly, at home, do you feel an intense level of love and support? And again, just as importantly, do you know they know that they are loved intensely and supported by you?
All right, so a little bit of personal background here, but I've got a 10-month-old daughter, and I'm coming out of a nightmare storm in terms of my relationship and life. But you're saying there's hope for me, right? Because what are you saying about people with kids?
Kids are difficult. As a matter of fact, most research shows that people without children are generally on a day-to-day basis happier than those with kids. It's at the end of life that we really appreciate what's happened and checking that evolutionary box. At the end of the day, work and economics are the means, and the ends are deep and meaningful relationships, and nothing replaces the meaningful relationships we have with our family, including our children.
You suggest that I'm going to grow old and nostalgic and we'll just forget about the tough times.
There's literally a hormone that secretes, not only when women experience childbirth, otherwise they wouldn't want to endure that pain again, but also the nightmare of children. I said kids ruin everything. Babies are difficult and they're tough. My kid has decided to refuse to put on a second shoe wherever he is, no matter what. However, these are the things, this humility, the bond we feel, the unnatural affection and passion we feel for children, there's nothing like it, especially the mother-child relationship. So kids, double-edged sword. But if you find this isn't fun, I'm not happy, again, that's a natural part of being a parent.
As you look back on your life, what would you do differently?
I wish I'd invested more in relationships when I was a younger person. There's a lot of science out there and a lot of programming around the importance of investing money early because you get compound interest. The most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. Put $10 away now if you're 20, by the time you're 50, it's $1,000. The same is true of relationships. Investing early and often of yourself, phone calls, text messages, notes, reaching out to people when they're struggling. These small investments when you're young add up, and you wake up and you have a wonderful relationship. I wish I'd invested more and more often as a younger man in the most important thing, and that is relationships. I was selfish, totally focused on myself, and I think I paid a big price for it when I woke up at the age of 40 or 42, and quite frankly was an island and didn't have a lot of meaningful relationships in my life.
Let's switch gears a little bit here, but why is Instagram so toxic?
So we're not good, as a species, we're good with communicating in small groups. It's only in the last couple hundred years that we began communicating with tribes or cohorts outside of our current network. And when we see, if you will, the Instagram version of people's lives, it makes us feel worse about ourselves. It's especially dangerous among teens who oftentimes, if they're not invited to a party, not only have the shame of not being invited, but have to see the party play out in real time. So there's a correlation between social media use in teens and things like self-harm and even teen suicide. So these social media platforms, quite frankly, are just dangerous on the whole, and I would argue a net negative for our teens. I can modulate my lack of affirmation or criticism on social media. I'm not sure my 12-year-old son can do that as well.
You said that envy is a function of familiarity, right? Like we don't envy the queen.
Yeah, we all wish we could take as many vacations as our friends seem to take on Instagram. And the Instagram version of their life, we basically every day are reminded of how less better looking and how less wealthy and how less successful we are. And we have a tendency, we have a competitive instinct, which is very healthy for evolutionary progress because we constantly anchor ourselves off the most successful, the wealthiest, the best looking, the person with the best relationships. The reality is, everyone is living a life that is anything but their Instagram lives. It creates a lot of shame, it creates a lot of self-loathing, and as a whole, the competitive instinct is important, but it also comes at a huge cost.
Tell me, what is your advice to unhappy people?
Well, this is a topic, quite frankly, that a marketing professor has to be careful talking about because I don't have any medical credentials to diagnose people and what they should do about real depression that might require some sort of medical intervention or talk therapy. What I would say is if you feel down, if you are looking for best practices, I'd say there's a few things. One, exercise. Try and sweat more than you watch other people sweat. The ratio of time you spend sweating to watching other people sweat is a forward-looking indicator of your happiness. We are happiest as a species in motion, surrounded by people we love. So if you can be in an environment, playing sports, exercising with other people, sometimes that resets the system. And I think that's the first line of defense against depression or anger is just simply to sweat more. The second is talk to people who care about you, who you trust, such that you can evaluate if this is a natural part of life and you deserve to be happy. There's nothing wrong with mourning. There's nothing wrong with being sad. Or if it's something where I would call the statute of limitations runs out and you need to pursue outside intervention. When my mom passed away, 24 months later, I recognized I was not moving on with my life. And as a master of the universe, macho, heterosexual male, I was embarrassed to tell other people that I was struggling with my mother's death. I should have reached out for help sooner. Don't be afraid to reach out to people who you trust, and you'll find out that all of us are struggling, and don't be afraid to do something about it. Give yourself space to mourn, but put a statute of limitations on it.
What's the honest conversation young people need to have with themselves about happiness and prosperity?
Recognize that the Instagram life that you've been told you can have may not happen. So ask yourself, one, what are my expectations around economic success? What are my expectations around my partnership? Where do I expect to be? And if I'm not there, right, how am I going to evaluate or perhaps recalibrate my life? Economics are important, having an open and honest conversation about how much money you expect to make. Also, the key decision in any life in terms of happiness is usually who you decide to partner with the rest of your life. Do you foot to your partner in the terms of values, in terms of physical attraction, and most importantly, do your values foot on money? The number one source of unhappiness among 30-something and 20-somethings isn't illness, isn't economic stress, it's economic anxiety between them and their partner. Money breaks up more relationships, and broken marriages is often the biggest source of setback among young people.
Let's move a little bit into technology here. But you said if we're being honest with our second-year students in business school, we would teach them courses on, I think you said FANG, right?
Yeah.
4 or 5. What would you teach?
So I believe the second year in business school is largely a ruse to try and garner double the tuition that we would get. The first year is really, for the most part, the majority of the value. If we were going to be honest about trying to increase our currency in the marketplace, we would focus the entire second year of graduate school on 4 companies, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, because to understand these companies is to understand true power, media, e-commerce, hardware, innovation. These 4 companies have become some of the most dominant entities in the history, not only of business, but likely in the history of mankind. Google knows more about you than any priest, rabbi, scholar, mentor, or boss. If you don't think Google is your God, ask yourself, who knows more about your future plans, your sexual fetishes, whether you're looking for a job, whether you're about to get engaged, whether you're about to get married. Google knows all of this before anybody else. Google is our God.
Facebook knows about our need to be loved.
Facebook initially held out the promise of catalyzing and strengthening relationships. It really is the promise of love. Unfortunately, it's gone beyond that and tapped into our tribal instincts, and that is the underlying engines of Facebook and Twitter encourage agita and conflict, because enragement is engagement, and engagement leads to more Nissan ads and more shareholder value. So unfortunately, the largest platforms in the world with the greatest reach are basically fueled on rage. I believe these companies should be broken up, and it's not because they're bad people, they're doing their job. Their job as for-profit entities in a capitalist society is to grow their earnings. Unfortunately, they have gotten so big that it's hard for any small company to get out of the crib. New business formation has been cut in half. There are twice as many companies being started in the Carter administration that are being started now. So we're in an era of non-innovation. If we were to break these companies up into small companies, you would find we would oxygenate the marketplace. More hiring, more VC-backed companies, a broader tax base, better for the economy, better for the planet.
They want the influence of a media company, but they're allergic to the responsibilities.
Yeah, they want to position, the four want to position themselves as platforms such that they don't have to take responsibility for the good and the bad. And as Tim Cook says, if you're going to profit from something, you have to take responsibility for it.
You analyzed WeWork's S1 filing ahead of its IPO. What did you find?
The shelving of the WeWork IPO, when the autopsy is done, it'll be diagnosed as death by S1, and that is this competence showed up called math. This company never made any sense. Companies that engage in gross idolatry of the founder are especially vulnerable to incredible destructions in value, as we saw at Theranos. Quite frankly, this has all been started by Steve Jobs, who was an individual who denied his own blood under penalty of perjury such that he could avoid child support payments while he was worth $250 million. The reality is the blue line path to a better world is more engaged fathers, not a better fucking phone. WeWork was guilty of a lot of things that all add up to something between fraud and something between vision and something between bullshit. And by the way, those three lines are getting increasingly narrow in terms of the distance in between those three lines. Nomenclature, or what I call fraud-splaining, saying the word technology 123 times in the prospectus when it has nothing to do with technology. Using the term atom 163 times to try and position him as some sort of godlike visionary founder. A company that has terrible gross margins, meaning that as it gets bigger, it just loses more and more money. And an outside investor that was willing to enter into consensual hallucination with the company that it was worth more than Ford Motor, when in fact it was just an elegant work-sharing company. This was a company that said it was going to enable or elevate our conscience. The reality is they were just renting desks.
What do these unicorn-like companies with a grand mission but with no clear path to profitability say about the world we're living in?
So again, this is a function of the environment where everyone is trying to recreate Google or Amazon or Facebook, and these founders were visionary and they told a great story. But this has kind of gotten so perverted and so out of whack. We now have companies that are talking about enabling our conscious or elevating our conscious, or Peloton isn't selling exercise equipment, it's about making us happier. So I think we have gotten to a point, and the term I would use is fraud-splaining, where nomenclature is being used as an optical illusion or an illusionist trick to distract us from the underlying fundamentals of the company. My name is Scott Galloway, and this is my brief but spectacular take on the algebra of happiness.